Hello and welcome to my channel. My name is Amanda and I'm happy that you're here. We've been doing a fall series where we read a selection from this book, 100 Wild Little Weird Tales, an anthology of spooky stories that I received as a Christmas present one year from my parents. We are revisiting it many years later. And just to give you a little bit of backstory, Weird Tales is a magazine that published stories from 1923 to 1954. These are coming up on nearly 100 years old, so if the stories sound a little bit dated, that's why. We're just here to have a little bit of spooky fun, and this is what I envision, kind of a slumber party bedtime story. I'm gonna read everybody a spooky story. Hope you're down for that sort of thing. I did a random number generation, and for today's video, we got the number 94. So I invite you to grab a beverage, kick back, and let's dive in. Story number 94 is Under the Eaves by Helen M. Reid. Finally, a story by a woman! I was wondering if we were ever going to get there because of the time period these stories are from. We finally got there. I'm excited. Hopefully this is a really good one. Under the Eaves. Thump, thump, thump. Spasmodically, above the wailing of the wind and the dismal battering of the rain against the windows, the ominous sound was repeated. Thump, thump, thump. Something was hitting against the side of the house. Something heavy. Hannah rose uneasily and laid down her sewing. Susan would be coming for the dress in the morning, but she could not keep her mind on the stitches. She thought resentfully of Judy. The ingrate. That was the thanks you got for 20 years of slaving. To be left alone with nothing to listen to but the wind and the rain and that hideous thumping. For perhaps the 20th time that night, she pulled the shade back from one of the windows and stared out into the darkness. Thump, thump. The sound was close now, but beyond the window was an abyss of blackness in which she could see nothing. Shivering, she sat down once more in front of the grate, where a fire struggled fitfully against the fury of the storm without and the semi-darkness of the room within. In its wavering circle of light, she sat erect and defiant, the flames outlining her sharp features and a thin knot of graying hair. It wasn't because she was getting old, she told herself sternly. A night like this would get on anybody's nerves. If Nate hadn't cleared out as he did, she frowned impatiently. Where'd they have been without me, I'd like to know, she'd muttered. And now they don't care what becomes of me, neither one of them. Anyway, thank goodness the thumping had stopped. But what was that? Someone knocking? Who on earth would be venturing out in such a storm? But the knocking was repeated. Resolutely, she threw the door open. A rush of rain and wind blurred her vision for an instant, and in that instant a man pushed past her, a tall man, thin and somewhat stooped, with straggling gray hair that hung dripping about his seamed face, for, in spite of the roughness of the night, he wore no hat. Hannah turned to face him, then abruptly she slammed the door, shut and locked it. "So you've come back to the old woman, have you?" she confronted him scornfully. "Found out nobody else would put up with you, I suppose." He made no reply, but settled himself in his favorite chair by the grate. "That's right," she went on bitingly. "Make yourself comfortable. How you've got nerve to come back after walking out on me like you did, I don't know." "Seems to me you told me to walk out." His words were pleasant but disturbingly sarcastic. She noticed that his usual docility of manners was entirely gone. "Better get on some dry clothes," she snapped. "You'll catch your death of cold." A faintly sarcastic smile was his only reply. He made no movement, and for once she was at loss what to say. She felt baffled and confused. "You told me to go," he repeated, "and I went. Why do you blame me?" She felt her face grow hot at the quiet rebuff. "Blame you?" she retorted. "I blame you for being a shiftless, good-for-nothing fool, that's what. Look at Clem Hanks. You don't find him dilly-dallying his time away, and what's the result? He makes more money in a day than you'll ever make in a month. And if there's anything more useless than a man that can't make a decent living, I don't know what is." "You convinced me of that." Something in his voice made her look at him intently. "Nate," she said slowly, "you know I don't mean things half as bad as I say them. If I'd have thought you had spunk enough to get out, I'd never told you to, and that's the God's truth." She pointed to the sewing that lay where she left it. "If it wasn't for the work Susan Hanks gives me to do, I don't know how I'd keep body and soul together. Now you're back, maybe. Won't Judy help?" She fidgeted under the gaze of his steady eyes. "That girl—" She checked herself. "Well?" "She left after you did." "Because?" "Because she turned against her own mother, that's why. Didn't I do everything for her with my own hands? Now she takes sides with you. I'm sure I don't know why." "Maybe I was of some use," he suggested. "Land knows I'm glad enough you came back. I don't know what's come over me, but what with you gone and Judy gone, this place is like a tomb." Thump, thump, thump. There it was again. "I wish you'd see what that is," she said. "It gave me quite a turn when I was alone, but now that you're here—" The fire had burned low. Nate's chair seemed to have drawn back into the shadows. "You won't mind, will you?" She was not in the habit of asking that question, but tonight seemed different. Thump, thump, thump. "Nate!" A sudden flare from a dying fire illuminated the room. Nate's chair was empty. "Nate! Nate!" she called around wildly. The wind shrieked around the house in a Ooh, that's a big word. Paroxysm. Ooh, I like that word. The wind shrieked around the house in a paroxysm of fury. The rain lashed against the windows. There was no other answer. Thump, thump. A cold trembling seized her. She ran to the window and threw it open. Thump, thump. The thing was almost close enough for her to touch. She reached out. Her hand closed on a sodden sleeve. A man's arm. She screamed. The next instant she had swayed and fallen. When she opened her eyes, she was stretched out in bed with Susan Hanks bending over her. "Clem heard you scream and came and got me to look after you," she explained. "Is he dead?" Susan looked away. "Yes," she said. "Can't they do something?" There was a note of pleading in Hannah's harsh voice. "He was in here," she said. "I was talking to him just before I found him. Out there." Susan left the room quickly. Hannah heard her speaking to someone in a low voice. Then the words of Clem's reply came to her distinctly. "Better send for Judy," he said. "She is delirious. Nate was hanging from those eaves all evening. The doctor said he's been dead for hours." And that's the end of Under the Eaves. Ooh, child. That was a good one. Oh my goodness, that was a good one. This story reminds me of The Telltale Heart by Edgar Allan Poe. In a good way. I really appreciate that we have the onomatopoeia of the thump thump coming in and out of the story ominously. And don't you think it's interesting that the main character, Hannah, is like lashing out at her husband and lashing out at her daughter and pushing them away verbally. And she comes out and says, you know, I don't mean half of what I say. And yet she drove him to that act, basically. And now she has to live with that guilt for the rest of her life. And I think it's very interesting that he basically came back and confronted her and basically told her, you convinced me of that. You told me to go. It's very interesting to me that his spirit decided to come and visit her and kind of speak up for himself in a way that he wasn't able to in life. And basically, in a quiet way, told her, it's your fault. You have pushed everyone in your life away. Do we think that Hannah will change her ways? I feel like they're kind of setting it up for her to lose her mind because of the time period. You know, she's going to be sent away because she's lost her mind. But do you think there's any reforming that? It seems like she's been a horrible woman. Do you think she got what she deserved? Stories like this make me sad in a way because I wish that the innocent people don't have to die. I feel like in a lot of stories, the innocent people end up dying, and then the complex characters have to tackle that grief in a complex way. And it just makes me sad. Why do innocent people have to die? I'm interested, dear listener, what you thought of this story. Please leave a comment below telling me your thoughts. If you liked this video, please give it a like and subscribe for more videos just like this one in the future. I hope you're enjoying your autumn, and I will see you in the next video. Prost. Under the eave, a scary place to be. Thump, thump, thump. Pull the covers over your head and go back to sleep.